Good morning, friends of Riverbend United Church. We are suspending in-person worship, as you know, and so this morning we are gathered in spirit, woven as one. I'm glad you're choosing to worship with us whenever you're joining in and from wherever you are. I invite us to be aware that in the midst of these difficult days and every challenge of our lives and every sorrow of our hearts, we are also being invited. There's an invitation in the middle of all of it to know love abundant, life abundant, love that casts out all fear, to grow as that and be vessels of that for the world. So I trust that you're here this morning because this is your community of faith, or because you're looking for some sense of touch into an eternal meaning that casts out the fear, or that streams as love and hope right in the midst of these difficult days. So I'm glad you're here, and we have an interesting sermon time, if I can call it that, this morning. We will have a forum of some of our local church member theologians seeking to mine one of our Bible stories for its meaning. So stick around, and for now, take a deep breath and enjoy maybe there's a cup in your hand, or maybe you're comfortable in your living room. Enjoy being wherever you are, knowing that you're not alone. We're all in this together. Let's share in our introit, Behold.
Please join me in our call to worship, based on Psalm 36, 5-12. Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Your righteousness is like a mighty mountain, your judgments like the great deep. You save humans and animals alike, O Lord. How precious is your steadfast love, O God! All people may take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light we see light. O continue your steadfast love to those who know you, and your salvation to the upright of heart. Our opening hymn is Love Divine, All Loves Excelling, found in Voices United, page 333.
Joy of earth to earth come down. If your children aren't with you now,
please grab them for a special children's lesson.
Good morning, everybody. So today we are going to talk a little bit about the book that we read last week regarding the invisible string. So what happened in the book, Adelaide? Just do a quick recap.
Everybody was connected to each other.
Exactly, by a string. So even when you were at school, we were still connected by this invisible string. And it was talking a little bit about how you can still love and feel connected to somebody even though they're not physically with you. So today we're going to talk about different ways that we can show our love for one another, even though sometimes we're close, sometimes we're not so close. Yeah. So, Adelaide, what do you think are some ways that we can show people that we love them?
Send them a letter, and FaceTime them.
Yes, we do a lot of FaceTiming here. Yep. Do you feel like going out to the park with people or going on a hike or spending time with people would show them that you love them?
Yeah.
Yeah? So when somebody does something that kind of makes you angry or upset, do you still love them?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when your mommy burns the pancakes and she kind of ruins the breakfast that you wanted, do you still love her?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the word we're going to throw out there right now is forgiveness. We forgive each other, and that's what's an important part of loving one another, right?
Yeah.
Is that not every day we're perfect, but we try our best, right?
Yeah.
So it's really important to forgive people, and that's part of love too, right?
Right.
So let's talk about God. How do we know that God loves us? What ways does God show us that he loves us? I don't know. I think for me, the conscience, like deciphering, having that thing in my head that tells me the difference between right and wrong and putting me on a path, that's how he shows me that he loves me. He takes care of me. He makes sure that I'm safe and I'm doing the right thing, right?
Right.
How do we show God that we love them? Okay. We go to church.
Yeah.
And we say our prayers.
Yeah.
And we learn all of our super fun, awesome Bible stories.
Yeah.
And we learn the lessons from our Bible stories. Right?
Right.
We follow the golden rules
Yes.
and the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
Right? Those are the different ways that we show God that we love them as well, right?
Right.
So even though we don't physically see God, or we're not doing these things directly for them, it still tells God that we do love them, right? So
Right.
I think it's important to consider those things when we're deciphering the meaning of love, you know? Yeah? Anyway, thank you for listening, and you guys have a great week. And I want you guys to show or tell somebody that you love them this week, okay? Have a great week, you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul.
Here's our gospel reading today from John 2, verses 1 to 11. It tells of the first miracle of Jesus. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that of you and me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each of them holding 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine, he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. And the steward called the bridegroom to him and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his many signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
We're all doing church in our living rooms this week, and I'm in mine, and with me in their own living rooms, we have Matthew Schoenhardt and Doug Spanner and Carolyn Miller and me. They are going to help us. We're all four just going to talk about this story that Matthew just read and see what kinds of things we can pull from it, what different meanings it might have for our lives, how we apply it, what was going on in it. So we'll see how this goes. None of us has a script. We don't have questions to answer. We're just going to talk. So while you all are in your living rooms participating in worship with us, just know that we are all in the same room of the Spirit at this time. So Matthew, thank you for reading the story. We know that it's Jesus' first miracle, and the bottom line question I've always had is, why was that the first miracle? What does it mean? But before we get to that, let's get the story unrolled. So I don't know, Matthew, do you want to tell us about what you just read?
The story is John is a very good storyteller. He gives you the impression that he was actually there. So this miracle doesn't actually appear in the other 3 Gospels. And what's nice about it is John gives you a lot of details about the story. He doesn't say, there was this wedding and Jesus turned water into wine. He gives you a full story. And what I like about that is when you listen to it in a good scripture is you can start placing yourself in the story, and you can be various different actors in the story or observe various things happen. You can get a feeling of what it was like to be there. I know, like at the end of the story, it's like you give it the good wine when everybody's drunk. Well, by this point, everybody's drunk and having a good time. So you can imagine that a little bit. And so that I really like the details in it.
It is very detailed, yes. So we have Jesus and his mom in this wedding, and they run out of wine. So somebody knows Jesus is there. His mom knows what he is. His mom says, "Jesus, go take care of this." And Jesus is like, "Mom, what are you saying? What does this have to do with us?" Sort of like, "What do you want me to do about it, Mom?"
Yeah.
But then Mom said, well, then she just takes it by the reins and away they go. And Carolyn, you had a comment about that, about the earthiness of that.
Yeah, well, as I'm fond of saying to you, I frequently volunteer my children that they'll be doing something. And it's pretty hard for a son to say no to his mum if his mum wants him to do something. But what I thought was quite interesting was Jesus says, it's not the time yet. It's not my time to be starting doing miracles. And I don't know if that's not God's plan, or if that's the earthly side of Jesus saying, I'm just not ready. I'm not ready to start. And I equate it to springboard diving. The thought of standing on a springboard and diving into the water for the first time, I would be terrified. There is no way you would get me on that diving board. And I wonder if part of it is his mum knows he's ready, and he probably knows he's ready, but it's taken that first step. And so the opportunity has appeared, and so he has been gently prodded by his mum. Yes, it is time. Let's go.
Okay. Yes, I have heard you many times say you will volunteer one of your boys to do X, Y, or Z. So if mom says he's ready and mom gets him in the pool of what he is, she just says, let's go. He doesn't argue, right? He just goes and does. And then we get back to the detail.
Well, I even like it that his mom doesn't even give him an opportunity to talk back.
Yeah.
She basically goes, yeah, whatever, I'm not listening. Off to the servants, do exactly what he tells you.
See,
Because-
that's an interesting detail, because we're given to believe in the first three Gospels that Jesus is born to a poor peasant woman who couldn't even pay for a room at the inn. And here she is when he's an adult with servants. And she doesn't actually say, Jesus, get the wine. She says to the servants, do what he tells you to do. So it sounds like some kind of big, huge, splashy wedding up in the Hamptons. And the mom says to the son, go tell the servants to get us some wine. And says to the servants, do what he tells you to do. I just find that detail kind of weird. Like, how did she get from being a little peasant woman to ordering servants around?
And at Cana, it's like, so I did a little bit of reading ahead of time for this. So apparently what happened is, it's very likely the wedding's at like a priestly household. We know that for a couple of reasons. One, you got the stone purification water jugs. So the stone jugs, they're big, right? They're 20 to 30 liters, or 20, 30 gallons, I should say.
Gallons.
So like 120 liters, like big things. And they're made of stone, so they're really expensive. So only wealthy people are going to have them, and only people really concerned with Jewish purity laws are going to have them because they're big and expensive. But also at Cana, what happened is the priests were sort of had this rotation in Jerusalem, I understand, where they'd come and go, and all the priests would come in for a couple of weeks and then go back home. And Cana is one of the places that's listed where they had some of the priests living. So this is a big to-do. So it is a big wedding in the Hamptons. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of servants there, and let's be honest, they're probably not paid servants. A lot of them are probably going to be slaves and such. And when I like it, when I talk about servants, and sort of as you pointed out, there's a bit of a social hierarchy there, and it's like when we give the good wine to the steward, who's, you know, a well-respected individual, he goes, where'd this wine come from? And the servants don't say a word. But we know in brackets, they all know exactly where it happened. Oh, we got this water from the river. It was pretty muddy. It's supposed to be used for washing your hands on. And you're drinking as if it's fine wine. And we're not going to say anything.
No, that's right. They're not going to rock the boat.
Yeah. So the lowest caste knows the answer, and they're not telling the senior caste.
That's interesting. Well, so Jesus tells them, go fill it with water. They do. and then immediately says, now take it to the bridegroom or to the steward, whoever, to the master of the banquet. There's no hocus pocus. There's no, let me spit on my hand and rub it on your eyes. There's no,
your faith has made you drunk.
That's right. There's no words. He just tells him to fill it with water and take it to the master of the banquet. So what happened in that moment? Is it sort of like, I've willed it to become wine? I don't know.
And then there's this, I don't know, like what Matthew said, there's this comical sort of exchange though that goes on where the bridegroom comes in and they've already drunk a bunch of wine.
Oh yeah, they're half of the bag.
Bridegroom, and they're all probably pretty hammered. And the bridegroom says to him, oh geez, you gave them the good wine even when they're drunk, because usually you save the good wine for the beginning of the meal and then you save the cheap, and you give them the cheap wine when they're already drunk. And you didn't do that. And I just think, well, if he's drunk, he's the bridegroom. How does he know what's good wine at this point? So I remember once Jill and I were very early in our marriage, we were up at Jasper Park Lodge, and we had just ordered the house wine for our meal, which was really cheap. And the servant was serving it off this wine thing and pushing it around, or he had the wine bottles on this mantle or whatever, and he would serve us from our bottle. And the second bottle, we were saying, that is the best house wine we've ever had. That's amazing house wine, spectacular. And then we said to the waiter afterwards, and there was this big table beside us of all these people. There were a bunch of people, and they were obviously been drinking a lot of wine. And anyway, we said this to the wine steward, that's just amazing house wine. I mean, how come it's so good? And he looked at it and he said, oh my God, I've been serving you their wine, which is about $120 a bottle. And I've been serving them the house wine. I better. And and he was very careful to, please don't say anything. And anyway, so whenever I read this story, I always think of that.
Did the other table know?
No, they never knew. They never figured out. They were well into their, it's just like this says here. You save you don't give them the good wine after they've been drinking it all. You give them the house wine. And we hadn't, anyway, it's just a funny detail. And I always find it kind of, whenever I read that, I was kind of amused by this, that the bridegroom sort of staggers out and says, wow, this is great wine. And like you said, the servants know it came from the river. And, but anyway, I mean, there's, like I said, there's these weird little details in this story that I just find it a very kind of funny story. Like I said to Valerie, I don't really see anything miraculous in this story. What I see is this because I just don't have to believe in miracles to believe in God or to believe in the divinity of Jesus. I don't have to think that he literally was intervening in nature and turning literal water into literal wine. I just don't think that's the story. I think the story is this party, and Jesus, the first thing they say after he is introduced is he says, let's go to a party and let's drink wine and let's get together and be a community. And I don't have to interpret it literally to enjoy the story and to be set up for the story of his life and his ministry. That's my take on it. Anyway.
Don't you think it's a very human story though? It's showing
I think it's very
the humanity side, and he does have a relationship with his mum. Most of the time you don't know about that. You don't hear anything really about Joseph too much in the books. But this is like, yes, we're at a party. This is how a wedding was. He's with his mum, and it's kind of humanizing. Like not everything has to be some deep, profound meaning.
I think it's a very earthy story. I think it's and really it's when it starts off with Jesus there with his disciples, the wine gives out, and the mother of Jesus comes to him and says, hey, they don't have any wine. Your disciples don't have any wine. You're not treating the guests properly here. And he says, all right, Yeah.
And that's what I find odd. It's like his first miracle is basically getting some friends out of a social jam. That's his first miracle.
Well, and you know, that's a pile of wine, like you just said. That's
it's like 1,000 bottles of wine or something like that.
Huge amount of wine, and they're and it, from what we're saying, what we're told, it's the first of his signs that revealed his glory, and his disciples believed him, which means, you know, he paid the tab, and they said, wow, what a great guy. I mean, I just think it's
another round on God, please.
Yeah, another round. Yeah, for my friends, set them up. And but I think it's also, I just sort of read it as well as this, you know, alcohol, as we use it, is you know, it's a social drug. It's a drug that dissolves people's social boundaries. You know, that's why you know, if you get a invitation to a banquet, it always says drinks at 6:30, dinner at 7 or whatever, and you show up at 6:30 and everybody's standing around kind of stiffly, and a few people are lined up at the bar, and then 20-30 minutes later everybody's standing closer together, and there's a buzz of conversation, and people are, you know, having a, you know, the anxiety, the social anxiety has been dissolved. And so I think it's kind of, that's the spirit of this particular story right at the beginning, is this invitation to the party, an invitation to the banquet, and that it's dissolving social boundaries. And that's, you know, I think here that as that's echoed in his ministry as well, that, you know, he crossed a lot of boundaries.
You know, Carolyn said it's a very human story, and you're saying it's the social boundaries, and it's a party, and it seems like the two come together somehow in this story, the very human earthiness, but also something happened that caused the disciples to see his glory, the first of his glorious acts, and they believed him from that. And if we're not going to allow for it being an actual natural miracle, which I'm perfectly fine with, but what was it that then the disciples after that said, we believe in him?
Yeah, well, I think that I don't know. And I think that's my answer, is I don't know, because I wasn't there. But I can, I mean, I often think of it, the way I think of it is the disciples are these grubby, dirty fishermen, and you know, people that have kind of tagged along to his ministry, and they show up at this wedding, and he invites them in and says, you know, here, drink the wine. I'll pay the tab. And they've been hanging around him, so they already kind of have been attracted to him and his charisma and his message. But here was sort of like Matthew's saying, this very kind of posh public wedding, and he's saying, you belong here too, guys.
Interesting.
You know,
so that's more of the social boundaries. Do you read that?
Well, yeah, but again, like I just say, I also hear it as something really like, you know, I don't. That's why I don't believe it. That I like the way John Dominic Crossan talks about these stories. That it's not that the people who wrote these stories, you know, wrote them literally, and then we're just smart enough to interpret them as metaphorically. It's more along the lines that they told these stories metaphorically, and in the modern world, sometimes we're stupid enough to take them, you know, literally. I don't think this is not an account of an act. This was a sort of a Time magazine journalistic account of a party. I don't think its placement at the beginning of the gospel is not an accident. But the thing that strikes me about this, story, what's that? I was just saying, the thing that strikes me about the story is how joyful it is. It's like how, to me, I just like, you know, it's a party and everybody's having a good time, and then he turns water into wine and everybody has an even better time. And I just think it's a joyful beginning to this story. And if it wasn't supposed to be joyful and exciting and invigorating, then it wouldn't be a very good invitation.
Well,
And is
thank
that your
you.
mindset
Okay.
of why it's the first miracle? Because it's an invitation miracle?
I think so, yeah. I think, it's like it's inviting people to the party, to this abundance, to this joyful experience of life. And I've always heard it that way in my mind. Then there's, like I say, these kind of weird details they're kind of earthy and funny, and then I actually was interested in what.
That's a really interesting point, that Matthew, that it's the first because it is the invitation.
Well, I don't know if that's all. I'm just asking.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know. I like the idea.
Carolyn?
Sorry, I was just going to say I like the idea of Carolyn's saying that it's also, Jesus is nervous. He's getting started in his ministry, and I don't know, maybe, yeah, but I don't think he needs to turn water into wine to be evidence of his divinity. I don't. That doesn't have to be the case for me.
What about you, Carolyn? Is that why the disciples said that they believed him? Because he was a natural miracle?
Well, I mean, who knows? Maybe he knew where there was a stash of wine. Maybe he knew there was a stash somewhere, and so it gave the appearance, or maybe he really did do it. I don't know. I mean, is it the case of water into wine? Are we supposed to read something into that because, wine is a drink of transformation, because it starts off as a little grape and it turns into wine? Are we supposed to look at the story, why are you saving the best wine to last? Is that a metaphor for our spiritual lives, that we start out not knowing very much, and then with our life experiences, our faith deepens, so becomes like fine wine? I mean, there's so many things that you could read into the story. As I say, I like the story because it gives Jesus a very human side, and I'm not sure that always comes across. He's always revered as the Son of God and performed miracles, and this is just a really nice reminder that he grew up in an earthly family, and these kind of things would be typical. So did he turn water into wine? I don't know.
What's that?
It's really handy to have your neighbor as the Son of God.
Yeah. Well, they were certainly upwardly mobile, because they started off in a stable and they ended up in a big,
In the Hamptons.
the Hamptons.
Well, they were invited to the Hamptons. It wasn't their house.
Well, it doesn't say that. It just says, but she says to the servants, do whatever he tells you to do, and that's her boy. So, I mean, why would the servants be listening to her if she didn't have some authority? But anyway, I don't.
There's
like I said, I don't.
There's a bottom line question around what would it take for us to believe in him? Water into wine, a miracle of the earthly type, turning the natural laws, or his presence? Is that enough? Barbara Brown Taylor says, man, he messed us up by doing these miracles, because now everybody wants one. So maybe there are other ways to read it. You guys have given several where it isn't dependent on a natural, on the laws of nature being suspended, the meanings that are in it. And what would it take for us to recognize that in every glass of water we drink, there is actually fruit of the vine. There is actually invigorating wine, or whatever it is that invigorates you. Every single thing is sacred. And in this case, the water is actually wine, which we know later is a symbol of his very blood. The river runs through it, sort of.
Because I mean, as metaphors go, there's very strong themes in the story. Jesus is the bridegroom of the church, and we're at a wedding, and he's saying, it's not my time yet to be the bridegroom.
Oh, nice one.
And so that goes through a bit. And Jesus talks about, as Carolyn mentioned, Jesus is the true vine. And what do grapevines do? They suck up water from the earth, change it into fruit, and then we can do some processing to that to make it wine. And so when we talk about the fruits of the Spirit, there's often the metaphor of the grapevine, and Jesus being the trunk of the grapevine. And so that's very, that flows through this quite a bit. And when it talks about, serving the bad stuff first and keeping the good stuff till last, if you were a Jew at this point in hearing the story, it's, I've listened to the patriarchs, I've listened to David, I've gone through all the scriptures. However, the best and most greatest prophet comes last, and that's Jesus. So there's some of that. And then I go back to say, like, the 6 stone jars. 6 is not a special number in the Bible, straight up. 7 is. So we're 1 short of 7. And so if that's the case, it's like I'm doing my Jewish rituals and I'm 1 short. And Jesus comes along and makes the party complete. So there's very strong metaphor and allegory throughout the entire story.
Good one. So I'm going to put us back on gallery here. So now we're all 4 on the screen. Is there anything else? Any final comments anybody wants to make?
I mean, what the final comment I would make is that again, we're trying to parse this story with 21st century minds, and I think it was a story that was written probably 100 years after Jesus' ministry, and by people that were trying to understand the impact that this person still had on them, and so it's a very I kind of like the idea of sort of trying to do the historical Jesus kind of thing and the numerology and all that kind of stuff, but at the same time, I don't need miracles. I don't think God just sort of intervened in this moment and literally turned literal water into literal wine, because I think God is ever present. And so I look around the natural world and I see miracles all the time, like everywhere. My work around, with the human brain, I look at the human brain and think this is a freaking miracle. I mean, I don't have to have water turned into wine to believe in divine inspiration and divine what's the word I'm looking for?
God's fingerprints are on everything.
Yeah, and it's the mystery of it is on everything too, and it's divine creativity is what I wanted to say. I mean, God's creativity is so infinite that it's everywhere, and I don't need 6 jugs of water turned into wine to convince me of that. But I love the story. I think the story is a joyful story of invitation. And I think sometimes Christians take themselves too darn seriously.
All right. Thanks for that, Doug. Matt, any finals?
Sorry, I'm going to Carolyn. I'm thinking for a second.
Okay. Caroline, any finals?
I don't really think so. I mean, I think it's really interesting that what Matt and Doug have said, and it's certainly given me food for thought to go and read the story again and maybe look at it through a different lens. Again, as I say, I love the story because it puts the human side to Jesus very much to the fore. And yeah, I like that.
I think you like it because the way his mum told him what to do.
Probably. I like it because he's a good son. He's a good son. I like it.
And a good mom. Thank you. Mr. Matt?
I think I'm good.
Okay.
I mean, I do like believing in the physical miracles just because it's the tangible evidence of everything that you know, everything that you believe, and everything you've experienced is irrelevant in the face of God.
Is irrelevant what?
In the face of God.
Oh.
So just because you know how gravity works and you can put put a man on the moon and you can split the atom, guess what? It doesn't really matter. God can ignore the rules of science and physics and do whatever he or she pleases at any given moment.
All right, so I'm going to stop you there because that is a great question. We should come back and have another forum around that question. Are miracles necessary or even possible? Yeah, but I appreciate that one of you said you don't need the miracle and one of you said you like the miracles. And Carolyn and I will kind of sit on the side on that one, or at least I will. You, Carolyn?
Yeah, I quite like a wee miracle, I have to say.
Spoken like a true
one. Not really big ones, just wee ones.
I like a wee miracle, yeah.
A true Scot. All right, well, thank you all so much for taking us into the Hamptons and kind of mining this story for what it might mean for us today. I really appreciate you doing this. You all have great things to say. We are a congregation of theologians, so thank you very much. And
thank you.
Peace.
Peace to you.
Thank you so much to the folks who've helped make this service possible, but especially, of course, Matt and Carolyn and Doug, as well as our musicians and our AV team. I'm grateful to so many of you, but also for so much of life, even in these difficult days. So as we are in a time of prayer this morning, I invite us actually to remember the words of C.S. Lewis, to make our prayer our lives and our lives our prayer. If we can find within us the gratitude for the little moments of life that do make our hearts smile, right in the midst of these difficult days, then we have lived a day in prayer. I know we're all grateful for our healthcare workers and our teachers and school staff. I know we hold them in our hearts, in our prayers. We reach out to them inside through the web of connection, through the web of life, the spirit that weaves us. These are not easy days for them. You all know, everyone knows people who are hurting, whether it's in our own families or neighborhoods, communities, or across this world. And even in the midst of such hurting times, challenging times, still there is the invitation of the wedding to find the abundant life, to find the joy, to find the gratitude right in the midst of the difficulty. Every challenge is our invitation. And we pray, oh God, that we might respond in the midst of these difficulties with an eye on your grace, with our hearts in your love, remembering that no difficulty, no darkness can overcome your light and your love. We pray in the name of the risen Christ. Amen. Our final hymn is Let All Things Now Living. So we're invited to join our choir and sing together.
Let all things now living, a song of thanksgiving to God our Creator, triumphantly raise, who fashioned and made us, protected and stayed us, by guiding us on to the end of our days. God's banners are o'er us, pure light goes before us, a pillar of fire shining forth in the night, till shadows have vanished and darkness is banished, as forward we travel from light into light. By law God enforces the stars in their courses, and sun in its orbit obediently shine. The hills and the mountains, the rivers and fountains, the depths of the ocean proclaim God divine. We too should be rejoicing our lovers and rejoicing with glad adoration, a song let us raise, till all things now living unite in thanksgiving to God in the highest, Hosanna and praise.
Thank you for being here with us for this time of worship together. I invite us to go out with the words of the prophet Isaiah. Let us go out in joy. There's a party out there, and be led forth in peace. It's right here in our hearts. And the mountains and the hills before us, with all their snow-capped peaks, shall burst into song before us, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Go in peace, friends. See you next week.
face to shine on you. May the Lord grant you his mercy and give you peace, abundant peace. May your table show the bounty of his grace. Let your journey show the beauty of your faith. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face to shine on you. Make his face to shine on you. Shall he shine on you.